Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the People Before Profit online rally. Stop the job loss nightmare, extend furlough. I'm Jane Loftus, the Vice President of the CWU, a union that covers postal workers, telecom and financial service workers. All of them are currently in dispute with their employers over a number of issues, whether that be health, safety, or whether it just be outsourcing or compulsory redundancies, like so many other workers in this country. Welcome to today. It's about extending the furlough. People Before Profit has set out an emergency programme for jobs and services and safety, and its main aim is to make sure working class people don't pay for the crisis with their lives and livelihoods. We've got some excellent speakers and we'll be going live to protests across the country. So the first people I'd like to introduce is to go over to Manchester, Carden Reissman. She's an NHS nurse and she's on Unison National Executive and she's speaking in a personal capacity. Over to Karen in Manchester from the protests.
You'll be shocked to know that of the doctors that died in the first wave, 93% of them were black-hair veins. Of the nurses who died, over 70% were black-hair veins. Of the elderly people who died, it disproportionately massively poorer people. It's always those who die. And they said that we needed to make sacrifices with our lives. We said at the very beginning, we'll have to get used to people dying. Well, I'm not used to our people dying. I don't think that our people are dying. And then they only get the ones to die, they also get to starve as well. They doubled the subsidy for businesses to do the new furlough. But the amount that you get as a worker has gone down to even less. You cannot pay 67% of your gas or electric. You cannot pay 67% of your rent. And that's why we're saying today, we will carry on fighting. We will unite. We will unite with people who are fighting against the racism of the society that we live in. We will continue to fight with the trade unionists who are fighting for decent terms and conditions and pay. We will fight for the people with the people who are fighting for decent health services, for the council cuts to be reversed. Together we need to say to our governments, right, this is not a case of North versus South. This is a case between people and profit. And we know the government puts profit first time and time again. Well, we put people first and we will carry on fighting until we win that battle and get rid of this disgraceful government. Thank you very much today. Thank you to the online meeting. Good luck to all the other people around the country. And thanks for coming today. We are not going away. We will carry on fighting. Cheers.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Manchester. Brilliant speech, and getting the sound sorted was great towards the end. But it's a unique rally, the fact that we're all going out live, and we'll be hearing from Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, later on. Our next speaker is McDonnell MP for Hayes and Harlington. John's been with us from the start of the health workers activist meetings. He's been part of the development of People Before Profit, and he spoke at our launch a month ago. So over to you, John. Warm welcome.
Thanks, Jane. It looks pretty blowy in Manchester for the valiant comrades out in the street there. Well done, Karen, as well, in overcoming the weather. But can I also say as well, look, you've got Andy Burnham speaking later on. I just want to say thanks to Andy on behalf of all of us, not just Mancunians, but the whole country. We needed someone. Particularly a northern leader, to stand up to this government, and that's what he did. Now, the government might well be spinning about how they handled it, but I think that inspired people. It certainly exposed what this government is all about when it imposes restrictions on people's way of life without the financial support. And actually, they couldn't care less. And I just thought those scenes of Andy really standing up for his area, for his city, but also, I think, standing up for the North and for the rest of us, for working class people. So I just want to pay tribute to Andy for what he did. It was inspiring. Look, you said I've been with the campaign from day one, and that's true. And the reason I've been with the campaign for day one is because, this pandemic has hit us hard, all our communities. Mine's exactly the same, food banks overflowing with demand, unemployment rising dramatically, wages being cut by exploitative employers. And yes, exactly as you said, Jane, people being forced back to work through hardship and to choose between health or basically hardship. And they're putting their health at risk. That's part of the problem. We saw it, first of all, on the construction sites, but we've also seen it right the way across industry as well and other economic sectors. So that's why we're campaigning on this. And the slogan is People Before Profit, because what's happening at the moment is the government is cutting the support. It's about, by the looks of it, to impose some form of national lockdown, about at least a month too late, in my view. But there's now going to impose another national lockdown. It's looking to reduce the support overall. And in that way, I think, force some people into abject poverty. And I don't know what it's like in other people's areas, but I tell you, in mine, people are struggling to pay the mortgage, pay the rent, and put food on the table. And they're racking up huge amounts of debt as a result of that. My view, we should be calling upon the government to do what they did in the banking crash in 2008, where they put the bankers' bad debts and they got rid of them. They took them over. And I think what we need is a debt jubilee for working class people now as a result of what they're enduring during this crisis. But the other aspect of the work is that we've been trying to focus upon is when you end the furlough scheme, as the government is doing, then you bring in another scheme. And in that scheme, effectively you're cutting people's wages, and you're giving no protection for those on the minimum wage. There's no minimum wage floor in all of this. What you're actually doing now, I think, is driving people to abject poverty. So let me just say finally, I wholeheartedly support this campaign. I support all those workers who are taking industrial action to defend their jobs and their living standards in terms of employment. I defend all those who are campaigning now to ensure that this government recognises its responsibilities so that when we have to go into forms of lockdown, there is proper financial support, not to prop up profits, but to protect our people. Solidarity.
Thanks, John. That's an excellent contribution and great ideas in terms of how we can get rid of the debt and protect the most vulnerable in our communities. We now are going over live to Glasgow. We've got Angela McCormack. She's chair of the Glasgow COVID-19 Action Group. She's a college teacher and an EISFELA rep. Over to you, Angela. Welcome.
Hello, Jane. How are you doing? Look, thank you very much. I'm going to be brief, but I have to say a couple of things. It's really important that we're all connected, that we're all standing together. And in Glasgow, been through the elements, and we're here today in the wet and the wind as part of Glasgow COVID-19 Action Group. And our plan is to continue the opposition to the Tory nightmare that we've been living through for years, for months, and they want to put us more pain and more fear. If you like, the Halloween scene is a chance to highlight the real people who should be fearing us getting organised, fearing us resisting. So I'm going to show you some of our protesting colleagues today. Tories stop, be Tories! So, Boris Johnson, here we go, the Tories are the real ghouls. The Tories don't care. And we're here today in a bit of wet, sunny, windy, Buchanan Street steps. If this furlough, as it starts today, comes to an end, there'll be millions of working class people and families in their communities in fear of their jobs, fear what happens to their families, fear of not having food to feed their children. And we are absolutely sick to the back teeth of our own. Sick to the back teeth, no more. No more. And we're here today to highlight that. The People Before Profit Emergency Programme is really crucial in terms of showing us how we can act together, how we can fight to defend jobs and services and keep each other safe. We've got challenges coming in the coming weeks, but I'm confident because of the people that are here today, that are protesting in Glasgow, that are watching from home, that are in Manchester, that are in Dundee, that are up and down the country, I'm confident that we can do what we need to do, because I tell you one thing, nobody's going to do it for us. We look around and we don't have the leadership we need, so let's stand up together. So we've got a message, a clear message to Tories. Be afraid. Be
Thanks, Angela. From a lively protest up in Glasgow. It may be wet and windy, but we're certainly out there standing up for our class, for the working class, and making sure we don't pay for the crisis. We've got another live protest to go to now. We're over to Southwark with Millie Bianchini, speaking from Southwark Defence Council Housing. Over to you, Millie.
Hello. Yeah, I'm speaking from Southwark Defence Council Housing. I'm at the Peckham Place development, which was home to the Wood Dean estate, where 323 council households were displaced in 2006. So we're here to protest these empty homes. They built a new luxury development in 2019, and it's been left empty for about a year. Only about 1/3 of the development is now full, and the rest of the homes are empty. And we ask, why is this happening here now, when there's an eviction ban that's being lifted, more people are going to the streets, and we need empty homes for people to live in. So we're here. I'm going to show you some of the protests. Here we are. Here is an empty home. Fill the empty homes.
Because 300 and more council homes used to be on this site, and now you can see so many of these homes. The majority of these homes are empty. It's £440,000.
Empty homes.
One bedroom flat on this estate. We say no to demolition of council housing. Start the requisition.
Stop the demolition. Stop the demolition. Start the requisition. Stop the requisition. Stop the demolition. Not for profit. 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 Not for profit.
When you see this, so before versus after, Wood Dean Council Housing, 323 council homes. Peckham Place, 440,000 for a one-bedroom flat. We say requisition empty homes. It's a hashtag on Twitter. It's a hashtag on Facebook. If you go to those, you will see this is our fourth protest demanding that Southwark Council requisitions empty homes for the people that need it during the coronavirus pandemic, for the people that are homeless, for the thousands of people on social housing, council housing waiting list, for the thousands of people put in danger by living in overcrowded accommodation, in housing that is not fit for purpose, and who are in the front line of the danger of the coronavirus pandemic. We say homes for people.
Not for profit.
Homes for people.
Not for profit.
Homes for people.
Not for profit.
Thanks, Millie. And it's great that we're out there campaigning about the housing crisis and the homelessness. It's part of a broken system, a system that doesn't work for workers in our communities, a system that works for profit and not for people. We need to reclaim our housing policies and make sure that no one is homeless throughout this country. Our next speaker, who's online, will be Wilf Sullivan. He's the TUC Race Equality Officer, fantastic supporter of the trade union movement, fantastic campaigner and fighter in terms of racism and fascism. Over to you, Wilf. Warm welcome.
Thanks, Jane. It's great that we've got this rally today. I mean, I just want to say a few words. I mean, because for me, the government's failure to take the necessary action that it needed to do to control COVID by giving resources to local people and control to local people has led to the situation now where we're about to have another national lockdown. And I think what Andy and the other mayors in the Northwest did was really shine a light on the fact that actually the government weren't really interested in local people and weren't really interested in working class communities. And for me, obviously, I'm a race equality officer for the TUC. The disproportionate deaths of BME people have been a big feature of my work. But instead of addressing the issues of racism and poor protection, low pay and job insecurity that give those workers little choice but to go out to work, what were we seeing from the government, right? Setting up some commissions that are just interested in looking at the narrative and blaming people because they live in overcrowded housing because they can't live anywhere else. And when somebody like Marcus Rashford comes along and talks about the reality of what that means, children going hungry, we see the callousness of the Tories in saying, well, actually, it's nothing to do with us, right? And not being willing even to give hungry children free school meals. How evil can you get? So for me, now more than ever, with the prospect of a new national lockdown, we need to fight for the reintroduction of a properly funded furlough scheme that supports people through this crisis. Boris is very, very fond of using the war metaphor. Well, maybe he might want to use some of the measures that this government took during the Second World War, was to nationalise the public services that were needed to provide proper support for people in Britain. Because that's the only way, actually, we're going to get through this crisis. This is a fight, I think, not just to extend the furlough scheme, not just to stop job losses, but against this freedom that the government want people to have to exploit other people. The freedoms that they want people to have to pay poor wages and to push up prices for profit, and the freedom to provide people with a means of living decent lives. You know, what's happening is not only are we paying for the crisis, but their friends are busy amassing profits and putting them in their bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. And we cannot stand by and let that happen. Somebody said, if we don't stand up and fight for ourselves, nobody else will. Thank you.
Thanks, Wilf. Thanks, Wilf. And I just wanted to say, I can't believe the Tories are running scared when people are sending them empty paper plates when they're prepared to have children go hungry in term time as well as in holidays. But a big thanks to all the people who work around the food banks, who are making sure our communities don't go hungry, and all the action groups that are around in our communities, making sure people do have food to put on the table. Absolutely unbelievable in 2020 that we're in this situation. And as Wilf said, the furlough is less than what it was in the lockdown. That should be the minimum, but everyone should get the wages. People are getting richer, the millionaires are getting billions, and yet we're told that we haven't got money to feed our children. Absolute disgrace. And if they think empty plates are scary, when they see the working class come together, they know what is scary when they're kicked out of office for what they're doing to us. Our next speaker, as previously mentioned, will be Andy Burnham. He's the Mayor of Greater Manchester. I'd like to thank him for standing up and being counted. My sister calls you the Prime Minister of the North. And I'd also like to thank you for all the work you've done for Hillsborough, to the injustices and the injustices that we need to overturn in terms of Grenfell going forward. So over to you, Andy. Warm welcome. Keep on fighting.
Oh, I certainly will. Thanks a lot, Jane. It's inspiring, actually, to be part of this fight back today. So thanks, everyone, for your words so far. Thanks to John as well for his kind words. Like Karen, I'm coming to you live from Tier 3. We're not quite District 13 in the Hunger Games yet, but who knows where we'll end up with this government and the way that it's going. I think we've got to wake up to what they're doing. They're dividing people and they're dividing the country, not just north from south, but also they're dividing the employed from the self-employed in terms of the way they're treating people. The so-called viable jobs from the non-viable jobs, a completely arbitrary distinction, which needs to be challenged. But also they're dividing the low paid from those on middle and higher incomes, as Jane was just saying. How can anyone justify the fact that there are people today in Greater Manchester who cannot go to their place of work, be that in a pub or a bookmaker's or wherever, and they're only deemed to be worth 2/3 of their wages, when earlier, when there was a national lockdown, people got 4/5? How on earth can that be justified? It can't be justified, and it needs to be challenged. Why? Because the lower your wages, the harder it is to live on 2/3 of your wages. We know why the government are doing it. It's so they don't have to pay out nationally if there is to be another scheme. And that's why we need to challenge it. You know, it takes a special kind of callousness, doesn't it, to brief a favoured newspaper on a Friday night that we might be heading into a national lockdown. All the worry that that's causing for people over this weekend. And that's why this fight back is so important. We do need to extend furlough now. But I would say, let's go further and demand not 2/3, not 80%, but full furlough wages for those who are the lowest paid in our society. That should be the call that's coming out of this event today, alongside support for the self-employed and support for freelancers who've been hit so hard, people on 0 hours contracts. That's what we should be demanding. Wilf got it right, I think, a moment ago. They centralised and they privatised when they should have localised, and we would have been in a very different position if they'd done that. They say there's no money, but they found money to pour it into contracts for their friends. They have been putting profit before people, and now we make the call for people before profit. Their approach is hitting the poorest hardest. That's what this virus is doing. We've got to draw a line here and say we won't stand for it anymore. People before profit. That's the call from Greater Manchester today, going out to you all. Solidarity from everyone here. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Excellent contribution, as you said, and we will continue the fight, and we will unite and get over our divisions and the inequality in society. But we need to make sure that we are looking after each other. And it is right, loads of people have fell through the cracks of the furlough scheme on the first round. We need to make sure they're not falling through the cracks now. We need to make sure, in particular, the creative and the arts and the event scenes, that people are kept in jobs and not just told to go and retrain. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And I agree with you, full furlough, and there should be a proper sick pay for people who have to isolate. Let's make it a solution rather than increasing the profits. We are all in it together. That is absolutely clear. You can see from the deficit at the moment that it is the working class and the poor who are paying the price of this government. And we need to make sure, again, that we stand in solidarity with each other and make sure that we unite and defend ourselves and actually overthrow the Tory government. And it's very apt now. We're going to go over to Windrush Square in Brixton. We've got Bel Ribeiro Addy, who's the MP for Stratham. So over to Windrush Square.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out on this very, very rainy day to support people before profit. We all know what's happened in this country in the past few months. The government has failed. They have failed exponentially. I cannot even believe the extent to which they have failed, and we have come to this position. Tens of thousands of people have died. There's a lot of uncertainty about jobs in the future, but yet they continue down their plan of putting the economy before people. No one's saying that our economy is important, but the people that make the economy are important, and the government has failed in its one objective, its first objective, which is to keep the citizens of this country alive. They're not doing that. They haven't done that with their coronavirus strategy. You can see that we are going into another lockdown because we did not follow the science initially. They kept saying they were following the science again and again and again, and they continuously lied to people. They locked down too late. They were slow to give people furlough, and there's still so many people that are excluded from the government support packages, and it's an absolute disgrace. Until we find a way to get control of this virus and stop it spreading, that should be our absolute first priority. It's not this government's first priority, and that's why we're seeing the situation we are today. So we need to make sure that if we go into another lockdown, that we have 100% furlough for people. How can people be asked to live on 60% or 80% of their wages for so long? We need to make sure that we're taking measures to protect people in all different industries that are expected to be key workers. Everyone that is going out, make sure they have the correct PPE. Instead, the government has sought to spend billions of pounds giving money to their mates, contracts to their mates, where they've completely failed. A test and trace system that doesn't work. PPE that wasn't even properly put together by companies that had never done it before. This situation is a complete disaster, and it's only going to change if the government adopts a zero COVID strategy where they take full responsibility for people during this time. So thank you all for standing with workers, standing with the people in this country that are going to suffer the most during the economic crisis that is looming. And I really, really do hope that in the next few months we can see the government change tack because of the campaigners that come out again and again like this and tell them what is the right thing to do. We need to put people before profit, keep people safe. And I genuinely believe that when we do that, when we take that first step, it will be a better chance for people in this country post the coronavirus crisis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Belle. That looks like a lively protest in Windrush Square. And thanks for all your work as an MP that you're doing to highlight all the inequalities in our society and standing strong. We've got over 300 people watching online, which is brilliant, as well as all the people taking part in the demonstrations. This is an excellent initiative, the Emergency Programme for Job Service and Safety. It unites us. It gives us a platform for taking things forward in all our workplaces. We need to make sure it's always people before profit, and we need to stand strong together. We've now got another protest to go over. We're going to go live to Sheffield. Martin Mayer, he's the Secretary of Sheffield's Trades Council. So I'd like to ask Martin at Sheffield to say a few words.
Well, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we've Sheffield Trade Union Council has linked up with People's Assembly and People Before Profit to come out today and make a protest on the street outside the town hall here in Sheffield about the end of furlough and the further reduction in the support that this government is giving to low-paid workers. We've had a cavalcade around the city centre with horns blaring. Our cars have been covered in stickers and posters, and now we've been out here for a socially distanced protest on a very, very bleak day here in Sheffield. And I don't mean bleak weather-wise, I mean bleak for the future of low-cost workers. Sheffield is the low-cost capital of the UK, I'm ashamed to say. There are thousands of people struggling to live on the minimum wage in our hospitality industry, in our care sector, and across a whole range of low-wage parts of our economy. They couldn't survive on 80% on the original furlough scheme, and they certainly will not be able to survive on 2/3 of it. It's absolutely appalling that the government is treating the lowest paid in this way. You could almost forgive them, maybe they're out of touch, they're millionaires, they didn't realise when they introduced the first furlough scheme, oh, some people might not be able to survive on 80%. Well, they've been told time and time again, and yet they've come out now with this new scheme, quite consciously saying it's going to be 2/3. That's it, that's all you're getting. And by the way, in the tier 3 spending programme that was given to our city region mayor for the tier 3 lockdown, they specifically said none of this money can be used to top up the national government schemes on furlough. Isn't that appalling? And it follows this shocking vote by the Tories in Parliament against Mark Rashford's proposal, supported by the Labour Party, of course, but for free school dinners for the lowest paid families. And by the way, Sheffield City Council here has picked up the bill, a bill it can't afford after all these austerity cuts it's had, but at least our Labour City Council has decided to pick up the bill for those free school meals. But as for furlough and the future for low-paid workers, we are really seriously concerned. Our food banks are working at maximum capacity. There is poverty here in this city, and it's down to this government, and we're standing up today to protest against it.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Martin. It's great to hear that what the councils are doing around the country in terms of making sure that they're doing the best they can to feed everyone. But as we know, there is a funding crisis in the councils, and we know that there will be further cuts. And again, this is all why we need to unite and make sure that we are defending it and that we are getting victories in terms of making sure people don't slip through the cracks within all these schemes. We've got another great live protest to go to now. It's in Chatham. It's with Mark, who's a Unite community member. He was made redundant after the wind down of the furlough was announced. And we're going to go over to Mark, and we send our solidarity greetings to Mark, who's in a very similar situation to hundreds of thousands of people across this country. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Jane. We aren't quite coming to you live from our protest. We've got torrential weather here, and our protest at 1, so we're holed up in a cafe, hoping for the rain to ease up so that we can get out there and make our demands, which are to feed our children, to defend jobs. We want to see an extension of the school meals programme, and we want to see an extension of the furlough scheme. And the furlough scheme is something that's very important to me. I've lost my job as a result of the furlough scheme being wound down. It was a real lifeline to me back in March, April time. I actually lost my job a few days before the scheme was announced, and it enabled my employer to take me back on and gave me some hope that I might get through everything that's going on with my job intact. Sadly, that wasn't the case. When the winding down of the scheme was announced, I was made redundant. I've been unemployed for just over a month now, and it's not easy going. I think the unemployment rate at the moment is as high as it ever got in the last recession, when I spent 14 months on the dole, and it's very hard. I've had a few interviews, but it's not easy to find work, and that's going to get even harder when the furlough ends, as it is today. There's going to be even more people facing the situation I'm in. There's a whole hundreds of thousands, millions of people on that cliff edge, and many of them will have already received their redundancy notices. It's going to get absolutely brutal, and that's on top of, like, I think there's 1 in 10 of people like me who are on furlough have already lost their jobs, and that's twice as bad if you're a black worker. It's 1 in 5 people who have been furloughed so far have already been made redundant, and it's something we absolutely have to resist. So I'd encourage everyone to get involved with People Before Profit out there. It's the one thing that's given me a bit of hope in the situation I'm in, and we need to come together and fight back. It's been frustrating at times watching the opposition spend more time attacking Jeremy Corbyn than attacking Boris Johnson. It's frustrating when you're sat at home in my situation to hear that catchphrase of "we will support the government." It's not something that inspires. What inspires is resistance, and I was glad to see.
It looks like we've lost connection.
That could take us back to the days, the hated days of Thatcher. So thanks everyone, and solidarity with all the protests.
Thanks, Mark. Right, we just lost Mark there for a little bit. I'd just like to thank Mark and say I'm glad he's being inspired by what we're trying to do with the People Before Profit emergency programme. Anyone watching live online, can you please share the link so we can get some more people in and involved? And also, if you could sign up to the emergency programme, that would be greatly received. And also, there is motions for any of your meetings that you're in terms of trade unions, community meetings, action groups, etc. If we can get as many people signed up so we can spread the word and the unity so that we stand in solidarity with each other during these difficult times. I'm now going to go over to Wayman Bennett. He's co-convener of Stand Up to Racism, obviously a lifelong fighter in terms of racism and fascism, and always the first to come out and support initiatives that defend the working class. Over to you, Wayman.
I want to give solidarity. I'm very glad and proud to be speaking at this meeting. I want to thank all the previous speakers that have spoken before. It says in Matthew 15:26 that it's not right to take children's bread and toss it to dogs. And that's what the Tories have done. Because really, they've taken £12 billion and given it to themselves. And they've done that, as Andy Burnham said, to divide our communities. And it's either scapegoating or it's struggle. And if you look what's going on now, at the moment, young and black and people are losing jobs faster than any time. Before we go into lockdown, which is too little too late, literally this government is costing us lives. You know, if you think about it, they don't actually care. From Cummings going on his trip because he wanted to test out his eyesight, we have to fight back, we have to resist, and we have to talk about the trend for youth unemployment is the highest it's ever been. But in particular, the Resolution Foundation found that 18 to 24-year-olds unemployment amongst black communities is now at 9%. That's before anything's happened. In other words, they've devastated us through poverty. They're devastating us through the lack of lives. That's the reason why Diane Abbott has called for a public inquiry to say why people died disproportionately from COVID. Doreen Lawrence did a report this week and he said unnecessarily people are dying because there hasn't been urgent done. They're literally killing us for their profits. That's the reason why we have to stand back. Black Lives Matter shows that you can come out onto the streets, you can have a movement that can rock a government, that can say stuff Trump, because this week he's standing for election in terms of encouraging the far right and the racists to take to our street. And when I see people in Manchester speak, do not forget our unity defeated Nick Griffin. Our unity smashed up the National Front. Our unity smashed up the British National Party. We stopped Tommy Robinson in the Northwest when he tried to use division. And that division came from the racism from the Tories, from the idea you blame refugees. And we have to make sure that this COVID crisis, this economic crisis, is something that brings us all together. Do not let them divide us. When we stand united, when we stand with solidarity, we can defeat them. And that's why the program is really important. The furlough means that don't starve us, don't let us die of disease. We have to fight back against this stuff. That's our history. That's how we got the vote. That's how we got civil rights. That's how we broke apartheid. That's how, I'm glad, that's how we resisted Thatcher. We've got to use our solidarity, put people before profit. Don't let racism and fascism divide us. Solidarity with the Greeks that break Golden Dawn when they faced austerity and tax. We have to follow that tradition. Let's speak Greek. Let's do strikes. Let's do struggle. Let's make sure we break Nazis and let's make sure we stand in unity together. to all the other people that have spoken forward. This is a brilliant meeting, and I'm glad that people are on the streets. Those streets belong to us. This world belongs to us. So let's make sure we do something about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Raymond, and solidarity to everyone and all internationally who are fighting the far right and are fighting their governments who are doing the same in terms of putting people before profit. Right, in terms of now, we're going to go over to John Woods. He's chair of the Portsmouth City Unison and chair of Portsmouth Trades Council. They've both supported the emergency programme, same as other trades councils across the country, and he's now actively involved. Over to you, John.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Solidarity and greetings from a very wet and windy Portsmouth. I'm very proud that my trade union branch, Portsmouth City Unison, and our trades council are backing fully the People Before Profit emergency programme. And we got a really good support here, a cross-section, despite the weather. People from Unite, from GMB, we've got Extinction Rebellion activists here. We're all demanding government action because we can all see what's happening. Ahead of us, we will face mass unemployment unless the government acts now. We have poverty already in abundance, with school kids starving because they're not getting their food from their school meals. And we're going to see more and more of that. People being evicted because they can't afford to pay their rent or can't afford to pay their mortgage. We'll see homelessness increasing, a crisis of mental health. It's no joke to say that actually we will see suicides rising. We face mass crisis in our society unless the government starts to act now. And, you know, then the government says there's not enough money. I say the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We've seen billionaires' wealth massively increase. And part of the emergency programme is about increasing the tax on the very wealthy. We want to take the tax back to what it was in 1980. 83% should be the top rate of tax. We should tax people who have a wealth of over £1 million. And we need to chase down these greedy billionaires, hedge fund owners, track down their offshore accounts, their tax havens, and get that money and start addressing the inequality we see in society. And that's why I think we have to extend the furlough scheme. We need to demand action, not only over that, because we face, as well as a crisis over coronavirus and people not affording to be able to take time off work to self-isolate, and the poverty I've just talked about, and the economic crisis that goes with that, we also face another crisis. Climate change is absolutely hasn't gone away. People have stopped talking about it to some extent because of coronavirus, but we face massive climate crisis. And we think that we can put the crises together. The solution is climate jobs. We want to see climate jobs in renewable energy, efficient public transport systems, retrofitting buildings and housing to make them fuel efficient. And a little while ago, the Campaign Against Climate Change produced a brilliant booklet, 1 million climate jobs. And that's what we should be doing now. We need to extend the furlough scheme and ensure that there's job protection for everybody. And we also need a just transition so that workers can have their livelihoods protected, and we can start having an economy that cares about the climate. And that's what we need to do. So we need to save jobs and save the planet. And I think we're going to send a little message out from Portsmouth that we have a way to do that. Now, we also have a little chant. So save jobs,
save the planet.
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 What do we want? People before profit. When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
People before profit.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
People before profit.
When do we want it?
Now.
Solidarity, comrades. Take care.
Solidarity, John. Excellent demonstrations and slogans, and quite rightly talking about climate change and the need for a programme of green investment, which is covered off by the People Before Profit emergency programme. Can I ask people to carry on sharing the link as we get more and more people to join online? So you make sure you're doing that, and it adds to the solidarity that people feel when we can see everyone come together, not only online, but actually protesting and socially distanced demonstrations, because all of us at some point will need to do that as we come under continuing attacks. Our next speaker is Eleanor. She's a women's rep for the PCS at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Solidarity with you, Eleanor. Over to you.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks for having me. I just want to highlight the repercussions of the government's failings for the Victoria and Albert Museum and culture as a whole. Cuts are and have always been an attack on the workers, jeopardising those crucial roles that always seem to be paid the least. And now more than ever in the height of a pandemic, it is becoming even more so apparent. The government has abandoned the entire culture and hospitality sector, continuing, however, to depend on the lowest paid to keep serving them in their pubs and restaurants, transport them on the tubes and buses, and to be the guinea pigs and first back in order to open theatres and museums, whilst refusing to provide the much needed relief and aid to actually keep those jobs afloat. The government has failed cultural institutions to the point that one by one, like dominoes, they are announcing redundancies. The V&A are currently in consultation over 102 collective redundancies, starting with the lowest paid and the most diverse workers who also happen to be the heart of the organisation. The V&A, like other museums, is increasingly run like an attraction rather than a cultural institution, choosing to prioritise income and money-making ventures rather than those workers that enable the organisation to function as a whole. Notably, the V&A has refused to join up to the new JSS scheme as they claim it is a short-term solution and will not save jobs long-term. Therefore, we say that the government must find a solution that can enable the museums and culture to keep their lowest and most diverse workers in their jobs where they belong. That being said, the executives are continuing to put money and the highest paid above all others, an example of which can be seen in the V&A, where the directors earn from £150,000 to £210,000 without taking any cuts, voluntary or not, and the lowest paid remain on £20,000, with first a reduction in salary over furlough and now are facing redundancy in a pandemic at Christmas in a shrinking job market. Culture should be for all and not just for the rich, and that includes its workers. Commercial funding models achieve nothing but holding them to the fancy of the markets, only leading to more commercialisation and privatisation, which in turn equates to fewer jobs with worse pay and little to no benefits. There is a remedy, and that remedy is proper government funding, and it must happen now. Thank you, and solidarity.
Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks, Eleanor. I think the Victoria and Albert Museum dispute is really crucial. I know within Liverpool they're going into disputes over museum redundancies as well. These are all jobs that will be there in normal times, and all the employers are doing is exploiting the situation because they will rehire at some point, but on lower wages. It's a complete attack on anyone in a job in terms of hiring and then refiring on loads of conditions. Employers across the country are exploiting the situation. As you said quite rightly, we're not seeing the top bosses taking any money cuts. They're quite happy in their little bubbles and their nice houses, etc. And you can see clearly the working class are paying the price for this crisis. And it has to stop. And it has to stop because it's not only about your livelihood. We are actually losing people's lives, people who are parts of families, people who live forever, the social care network. You know, it is a crying shame. The last wave was horrendous. Myself, as chair of our postal executive, we held a minute's silence each week for the people and the postal workers who've died from COVID. And it was noticeable they were all from BAME communities. We've started seeing that rise again over the last few weeks. But yet we are still in debates and struggles about pay, about compulsory redundancies within our BT area. This is a disgrace. These jobs are there. They need to be protected. They should be on full furlough. No one should be paying the price. And if anything, we should be taxing the big businesses and the people who are the billionaires who've got the luxuries of their own islands to jet off to when they want. There is inequality, massive inequality, and that's being exposed. So good luck to all people who are taking action, who are finding ways through the pandemic to hold their ballots, to strike, or in fact have wildcat strikes over safety. It's us against them, and that is true. We are not in it all together. Our next speaker, I'm glad to say, is Michael Rosen. He's obviously a renowned author and poet and activist, an absolute inspiration. He's been there through the COVID crisis. He's been sick. He's now back with us, but I believe he is the sign of the humanity that we all have with each other. No one should be losing their lives during this time. So I'm going to go over to Michael and welcome you, Michael, and send our best wishes to you and your family for what you've been through. Michael.
Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Is that all fine? Right, let's remember one thing. The dead people cannot speak. The people who've died through this crisis, through what's happened with this pandemic, they can't speak. And when we think about the people who died, let's remember that in February and March, the World Health Organization warned us, warned our governments, warned everybody as to what was coming and what needed to be done. And when I got ill in the middle of March, I couldn't be, towards the end of March, I couldn't be tested because the system wasn't up and running. Test, trace, isolate was not in place. And even now, it's chaotic and hopeless. So here we are, all these months later, when you go back, go to the World Health Organization website, look at their timeline, see what it is they were saying, and you get a picture of how criminal it was that our government didn't take those steps, which indeed would have saved me from what I went through and all the thousands of people who died, and the disproportionate point that you've made that BAME people and working class people, people in poverty have been disproportionately affected by this illness, all right? And of course, old people, we've had that spin-off, this ghastly, horrible spin-off that we know that our, the ruling orders, if you like, will victimize and pick on people. And on this occasion, absurdly and crazily, they've made old people, people over 70, they've picked on and said that somehow or other we are part of the necessary death. So this is when they started playing around with their idea of what they called herd immunity. Let's not mistake this. This is a form of eugenics. This is a form of ideas that originate in the United States and Nazi Germany, the idea that people can be dispensed with sections of the population. These ideas were circulating around in the government. We know Dominic Cummings and others were flirting with this idea of herd immunity, but not referring to vaccination, referring to the idea that if some of us, like me, died, that somehow or other the rest would be saved. And it carried on. I've seen it. I've had arguments with journalists online and people still carrying on with that. And now to move to the issue about money and whether there's money available. I'll ask people to look at the BBC website, October the 21st, Faisal Islam asked the question, is there really no money for school meals? This was over the Marcus Rashford issue. And way down on the thread, you'll see, way down on his article, you'll see something that is really very important. The government issued bonds worth 246 billion, that's with a B, not an M, billion, and the Bank of England bought them back. Okay, so when we talk about money or that money's running out, there isn't money for furlough. We haven't got the money to pay people, so we got to sack them. The age-old austerity issue that we went through and are still going through. All right, remember the government issues bonds and the Bank of England sits on a typewriter, I'd say, because of my age, but you know what I mean, a keyboard, and they tap out the money to give to the government, 246 billion. So our question is, what has this money gone to? Where has it gone? Well, the answer is they've paid a lot of that money to the private industry to run things like test and trace. And could they do it? No, of course they couldn't, because they weren't the health workers. They weren't the public health organization that we believed in and that our forefathers, or in my case, my parents, fought for, and we got in 1948. I was born in 46 as it happens, but 48 and all our lives, the idea, this wonderful principle that we, through our tax and through all of us paying for a health system from cradle to grave, this beautiful idea, and it is this National Health Service that saved my life. I was on a ventilator for 40 days. I was in intensive care for 48 days. I was in hospital for 3 months. I am alive because of the National Health Service, because the incredible love and care and sacrifices made by nurses from all over the world and from here, of course, originally, but you know, from everywhere, supporting me and enabling me to live, and still doing it. I have to go to, I've lost the sight in my eye and the hearing in my ear and various other things. I got blood clots in my chest caused by COVID, and it's the health service still where I go for clinics regularly, once a week, once a fortnight, that is saving my life. And it is this is our principle. This is what we believe in. It came from our movement, the National Health Service. It's ours. And when we say we want furlough to be continued, it's because we believe in people. We believe in the people who are doing the work, who are getting things done and saving lives. Why should they be taking the sacrifices while, as you pointed out, there's the rich are doing fine out of it. And one of the reasons why they're doing fine is because the government is printing money and handing it to them. It is extraordinary. And if, you know, it's hidden away, as I say, I'll give you the reference one more time, October the 21st, Faisal Islam. Is there really no money for school meals? The government is handing money to people who ran phone companies to run sections of the health service. Why isn't this seen as a national crime? It's seen as a bit of a problem or a bit of a chaos, and jolly old funny Boris or something, you know, he can't tie his shoelaces up. It is much more evil than that. This is a betrayal of everything that we believe in. Let's remember that health service that was created by us, by our forefathers and mothers. They created that, and its beauty is still there if only we could support it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Michael, and it's great to hear from you. And I know you actually touch everyone in the heart when you talk about what's happened to you, but also you pay tribute to all those people who haven't survived, who have been lost before their time. And in terms of, I don't believe we've even got out the first wave and we're in a second wave. The actual predictions are further than what happened death-wise in the first round of lockdown. Absolute disgrace. They're people's loved ones. They're people who've contributed to society and still contribute. And we have to big up our health workers, our social care workers, anyone in our communities who's making sure people have access to healthcare and are staying safe, and that they can make sure that we're not just disposable like a tissue. We are human beings, we contribute, and we are here. So we need to unite and make sure we all stay well and we look after our people, because their class certainly look after themselves and make sure that they're okay. Our final speaker today, on a note of victory, which is absolutely excellent. I know certain people, industries have had some victories during lockdown. My own union, we managed to get rid of our CEO, Rico, back during lockdown, and it looks like we might have to get rid of our interim CEO again, because they're still not looking at postal services that are a public service. And it's the same as everyone. If you deliver a public service, it should be in public ownership, not run for profit, but run for service and the benefits of our communities. So I'm going to hand over to Albert Durango. He's the General Secretary of the Cleaners and Allied Independent Workers Union, on their members' victory at Facebook. Over to you, Alberto.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. And many of our members are watching now live. Yes, we haven't the biggest attack we in the experience in our life. We have many of members being made redundant, and job cuts, etc. is happening all around the country, etc. In our specific situations, we launch a campaign saying that cleaners are essentials. The employers, they say, yes, we are in the middle of pandemic, but we need innovation, and the innovation is to cut people. They treating us like fools, and we say, no, we are not sorry about you, we are angry, and we have become together, and we are gonna fight back. So one of the examples I can expose here is the recently victory of the Facebook cleaners, that they become together, use the union, we start a formal dispute, we use the social media to highlight the injustice, and we won the political, we won everything. And the situation is all these workers, including Facebook workers and all these cleaners, they're working for greedy outsource companies that using COVID as an excuse to reduce conditions. And we are proving that these people have money to pay the cleaners. And also, if you don't have cleaners, you don't have cleaners, you will have the pandemic there. You will have your place of work unsafe. So at the moment, I want to congratulate the members of Facebook that they decide to fight back. And we went to do two protests with all the members there. We get bullied by security Facebook people, and they threatening us with the police, etc. And we still protesting, and we still been there. And we have a great victory. We say 15 full-time jobs, and all the workers are really, really, really happy. But this is an example. But next week we're coming back to Facebook again, because all the workers from the micro kitchens, the cleaners won the victory, but there is other outsourced workers that are being under attack. So in this case, next Friday, the micro kitchen workers that working for the company to go inside the Facebook gonna protest again, and we're gonna keep fighting inside in the same workplace. So one Radbone Square. And then this is not gonna be the only one. I believe we're gonna be on the streets all the time, because that's the only way, fighting back the employers and exposing the injustice, because they have the money and then and we can protect. But the only way is the way that the Facebook workers showed to us. Fighting back, don't believe in the lies. Thank you.
Thanks, Alberto, as the last speaker. Ended on a high in terms of if you fight, you can win. And just to say, a big up for the cleaners. They've been undervalued, they're underpaid, and absolutely they are key to safe workplaces. If anything, we should see them more valued, and there should be more hiring of cleaners to make sure that COVID doesn't spread and infect other people. Also for outsourced workers, they too have come together to fight, and it's great to see trade unions leading those fights on outsourced workers. All I wanted to say to you in my closing remarks is join People Before Profit, sign up to the emergency programme, pass the motions, join in with us on our protests, make sure anyone you're involved in terms of community action groups, that you become involved with People Before Profit. We need to show solidarity with each other. We need to fight inequality to make sure we're not divided, and that we come together. We need to build fighting unions that show solidarity and that stand together with everyone else. So it's a good afternoon from myself, but just to say, let's keep the fight going. We can win. Let's make sure the Tories are kicked out of office, and we actually have a government at least that is willing to support the working class. And if they're not willing to support them, let's make sure we get working class MPs in there to make sure that we are fighting. Together we can win. Together showing solidarity, unity, we can win, and we can make sure we have less deaths and we have workplaces to go back to in the end. Thanks everyone, it's been a great rally, and thanks everyone who's been out on the protest. Bye.